Good morning everybody, I am Anusha, working as Assistant Professor in Computer Science and Engineering Department in the Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. In my videos, I am discussing about programming with objects, which is based on Java. In the previous videos, we have discussed about files and streams. And in today's video, we will be discussing about how Java can be connected to a database and about JDBC. So a database is a place wherein we store data. It can be the data are stored as tables in a database. So we organize these data in the form of tables as rows and columns, and we have each some index to make it to find those data is in an easy way. So there are a large amount of information. This database operates on a large amount of information for storing, retrieving, and managing data. There are many databases available in the market. MySQL, Sysbase, Oracle, MongoDB, etc. The Oracle database is the first database which is designed for enterprise-grade computing and the most flexible and cost-effective way of managing information and application. The structured query language is the language which is used to query database. If we want to retrieve or if we want to do any manipulations on the database, we make use of the structured query language, the SQL. The cloud database facilitates you to store, manage, and retrieve their structured, unstructured data via cloud platform. This data is accessible over the internet. Cloud databases are also called as database as service because they are offered as a managed service. Some best cloud options are Amazon Web Services, Snowflake Computing, Oracle Database Cloud Services, Microsoft SQL Server, Google's Cloud Spanner. Next, let's look into Java's database connectivity, the JDBC. So as we know that SQL is the most popular language which is used for database management. It is a widely used open source language for database systems. So the SQL is used to create a table, enter a data into the table, update the records in the table, retrieving data from table, etc. JDBC is a Java API which is used to connect and execute the query in the database. It is a standard that provides the interface for connecting Java and a relational database. The JDBC standard is defined and implemented through Java standard interfaces as the Java.SQL interface. It enables the individual providers to implement and extend the standard with their own JDBC drivers. So JDBC is the API which we use to connect the Java system and the database system. So it contains its own methods and methods which we make use in retrieving and manipulating the database. The Java.SQL package contains classes for database related programming. It includes the Java.SQL driver manager class and two interfaces, the Java.SQL driver and the Java.SQL connection. JDBC is a SQL level API which is very popular for relational database management system. It is compatible with most of the popular DBMS, namely Oracle, MySQL, Sybase, Microsoft SQL, etc. This is the structure of JDBC. So we may have various Java applications working on our front end, and we make use of the JDBC driver to connect to the database servers which is working as in the backend. So JDBC will provide lot of methods which will make the Java application and the database to interact with each other. Now, why we go for JDBC is because it is a write once, run anywhere form wherein it can be used in multiple clients and server platforms. These databases are optimized for searching and indexing. It provides network independence and database independence. That means the Java can access any database vendor using JDBC. There are 4 types of JDBC driver. The type 1, which is JDBC ODBC driver. The type 2, which is partial Java driver, which is the native API driver. The third is network protocol driver or the fully Java driver. And the thin driver type 4, which is fully Java driver. The type 1 JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Here, the JDBC ODBC bridge driver, it acts as an intermediary between the JDBC API and the ODBC driver. So this converts all the methods of the JDBC API to ODBC driver function calls. But now this is discouraged because of the use of thin driver. The JDBC driver uses ODBC driver to connect to the database. So it converts the JDBC method calls into the ODBC function calls. Oracle does not support the JDBC ODBC bridge from Java 8. It recommends that you use the JDBC drivers provided by the vendor of your database instead of the JDBC ODBC bridge. The advantages of this driver is that it is easy to use and it can be easily connected to any database. Disadvantages is that performance is degraded because JDBC method call is converted into ODBT function calls. And the ODBC driver needs to be installed on the client machine. Next is the native API driver, which is partial Java driver. The native API driver uses the client-side libraries of the database. The driver converts JDBC method calls into native calls of the database API. It is not written entirely in Java. So here, this native API driver converts the JDBC API calls into the vendor's database library calls. So they require this client side. It requires these client side libraries to be installed. So the that means the native driver must be installed in the client machine. So the advantages of this driver is that performance is upgraded. The performance is upgraded than JDBC driver, but the disadvantage is that the native driver needs to be installed in each client machine and the vendor client library needs to be installed on the client machine. The third type is the type 3, which is the network protocol driver. It is a fully Java driver. This uses a middleware that converts the JDBC calls to the vendor specific database protocol, and it is written completely in Java. So they use of this protocol driver. It make use of a middleware that converts the JDBC calls into the vendor specific database protocol. The advantages is that no client-side library is required because the application server that can perform many tasks like auditing, load balancing, logging, etc. The disadvantages are network support is required on client machine. It requires data-specific coding to be done in the middle tier. The maintenance of network protocol becomes costly because it requires database-specific coding to be done in the middle tier. Next, we have the thin driver or the full type 4 driver, which is in use nowadays. The thin driver converts the JDBC calls directly into the vendor specific database protocol. This is why it is called as thin driver, and it is completely written in Java language. The advantages are that it's better performance than all other drivers and no extra software is required at client side or server side. The disadvantage is that drivers depends on the database. The Oracle provides the following JDBC driver, the thin driver. The JDBC thin driver is a pure Java type 4 driver that can be used in applications and applets. It is platform independent and does not require any additional Oracle software on the client side. The JDBC thin driver communicates with the server using Oracle Net services to access Oracle database. The JDBC thin driver enables a direct communication to the database by providing an implementation of Oracle Net services. Now let's look into a few of the SQL statements. In SQL, there are mainly two types of statements, the data definition language and the data manipulation language. The data definition languages allow us to create and modify the schema of the database. That means if you want to create a database or you want to create a table in a database, alter the structure of the database, alter the table in the database. We want to drop any table in the database, we make use of the data definition language statements. Examples like create, alter, and drop. The data manipulation statements are used to access and manipulate the data in the existing database. These statements do not implicitly commit the current transaction. Examples like select, update, and insert statements. Let's look into how to create a simple database. Here I am creating a database named as test. Inside that test database, I am creating a table called as Java course, which contains 4 columns. One is the roll number, which is of integer type, and it forms the primary key of that table. Primary key is a unique key in that table, and we make use of it to uniquely identify any row in that table. Then we have another column named name, which stores the name of the students. Then its data type is varchar of 30 length. Then we have a marks column, which is of again integer type, and it cannot be null. And we have a grade grade column, which is again varchar. So now it forms a table like this. This table name is Java course, and it contains role, name, marks, and grade. So into this table we are inserting 4 columns, 4 rows. So the syntax is insert into Java course values, these values. So after first executing the first statement, you get this. Then after inserting the second row, we get this. After inserting the third statement, we get this. And the fourth statement, insert the 4th row. So this is the structure of the Java course table. So inside the database name test, we have created a table. Now in our examples, we will be making use of this table. Now that once we create, so this table can be created using SQL is created inside my MySQL using MySQL. So once the table is created, we can insert data into the table. We can delete the data. We can alter the contents of the table. So various operations are allowed. So we generally make use of the SQL statements to operate on those tables. Now, if you want that SQL statements to be operated using the Java program, we make use of the JDBC connectivity. So, in order to have this Java system connect to the database system, we make use of the JDBC connectivity. So, there are 6 steps in which we connect the Java to the database. So first of all, we have to load the JDBC driver and define the connection URL. The second step is to create or establish the connections. Then the third step is to create the statement object and connect to the database data source. Then you execute the query using the SQL statements. Process the results and map the results to the data structures. And the sixth is to close the connection. So these are the various steps involved in querying the database with JDBC. So when you connect to the database, first we have to register the driver and then connect to the database. Then we start querying. So to start querying, first we have to create the statement and then we make use of the SQL statements to query the database. So once the database is once the query is executed, it will return the result. So we have to step up, we have to go through the results, and it will be stored in a results in the table, and we have to extract those results and assign it to the Java variables, and then close the connection. So we have to close the result state, the statement, and the connection objects. So let's look into the steps in detail. So the first step is to load a JDBC driver and define the connection URL. So we make use of this method, class.forName method, to load the driver. So if we are making use of the MySQL driver, this is our syntax. So class forName com MySQL CJ JDBC driver. So this is the statement which we make use to load the driver in case we are using MySQL. In case if we are using the Oracle, then we have to go with this statement. And for JDBC ODBC bridge, we make use of this statement. Once we define the JDBC driver, then we have to establish the connection. So for that, we make use of the driver class to driver manager class to get a connection with using the get connection method. So this is the basic syntax of making use of the get connection method. So we specify the URL in which the database exists, the username, and the password. So in my case, I'm creating a connection object using the get connection method of the driver manager class, and this is my location, my URL, my username and password. The third step is to create the statement object and connect to the database source. So to create the statement object, we make use of this statement. So the create statement method. So we are creating a statement object. Now there are three types of statements. For the simple statement, which is used for executing simple SQL query statements. The prepared statement, which is used for executing a pre-compiled SQL statement, and the callable statement is used for executing the database stored procedure. Now, these are the various methods in statement class which we mainly make use of. The execute query method executes the SQL query and returns the data in a table. That table is called as a result set object. This method is used for SQL command that expects a return data from the database. Execute update method is used to execute the insert, update, delete, create table, drop table, alter table statements. It returns a number of rows that were affected in the database. The execute method is a generic method for executing simple SQL statements, stored procedures, prepared statements. It can be used when the statement is either related to query or update. This method returns true if the query yields a row. And get max rows determines the number of rows a result state can contain. Now, after this, we can go for execution of the SQL statement. So, if we are executing the select query, so first we have to write the query and store it into a string object, and then pass that as a parameter to the execute query method. So, first we will write the select statement and then pass it as a parameter for that execute query method. Same way, if we want to make use of the insert statement, then we again create a string object with that query and then pass it as a parameter to the execute update method. Next is the processing of results and map the result to a data structure. So a result set is a table of data representing the database result set, which is usually generated by executing a statement that queries the database. So for only one result set per statement can be opened at a time. The table rows are retrieved in sequence. A result set maintains the cursor pointing to its current row of data. The next method moves the cursor to the next row. And you cannot rewind back. So these are the methods inside the result set, which wherein the next method attempts to move to the next row in the result set. The first call to the next positions the cursor at the first row, returns false if there are no more rows. The getType method retrieves the type of the result set objects. The close method releases the result set objects database and JDBC resources immediately instead of waiting for this to happen when it is automatically closed. The find column method maps the given result set column to the result set column index. Label the result set column label to its column index. Now let's look into a simple example of inserting data into my table which we have created already. So using how I had created my table in using MySQL database, and we will be using the JDBC connectivity. So here we have we have to import all these classes and interfaces. Then this is my class. So I am creating a connection object and a result set object which is initialized to null. Then I'm creating some variables which I will be using in my program. So the first step is to load the JDBC driver and define the connection URL. So for that I make use of the class.forName method and I pass the URL, pass my data. Then we have to establish the connection. So to establish the connection, I'm making use of the get connection methods inside the driver manager. So to which I pass my URL, username and password. Then after that, I create the statement object and connect to the data source. So I make use of the create statement for that. Once this is done, the database connection is established. Now I have to insert some data into my existing table. So we have already seen the insert statement query. So that statement we have to pass it as that query we have to pass it as a parameter to the execute update or the execute method. So in first case, I'm making use of the execute update. So into which, so we already have a table with in which a few data is inserted, and into that table I'm entering the next row as with the roll number as ID as 15, then Priya ABC as a name, and the marks and her grade. So the second second row into the next row I'm passing these data. So to my already existing table, these two data will be appended. So finally I will get a table like this. So this will be the table which is already there. So we had 4 columns. So we already entered these values into the table before, and after that I have inserted these 2 tables rows. Now, so when to get that output, we have to make use of the this select star from Java code. So when that is when these 2 statements are executed, data is inserted into the table. Now to retrieve those data, we are making use of the select statement. So this is another way of executing the SQL query. So into the string, I am passing this select statement, and I'm passing that string object as an parameter to the execute query of the statement class. So once that is executed, we get that output. So that output will be stored into the result set table. So from that we have to retrieve it. So that table is being retrieved into the RS object of the result set. Then from that table we are retrieving the data and displaying it on the console. So I'm making use of all these variables to retrieve each data by data from the result set object. So I make use the getString method to retrieve the name, and roll number, the marks and the grade. So until there is a row in this table, this will keep on working. This loop will be executed. So for every retrieval, I'm displaying the name and whatever data was retrieved. So first name we had Devashish with roll number 175 and A, which was already inserted before this execution of this query. Then once that is retrieved, all those values will be stored into here, and then that data is being displayed in using this method. Then it will check whether it contains whether there is still rows in that table of the result set. So there are still more rows in that. So it will retrieve the next set of elements. So that will be, it will retrieve the Nilanjan roll number 2, 85 and grade, X grade. So the second row is being retrieved and the second row is displayed using this statement. So we get the second, this full row is being displayed. Likewise, all the statements, all the values, which there were 5 rows in that table. So all those 5 rows were retrieved and displayed onto the console. So once that is done, then we have to close the database. So for that, we are calling close method over the connection object, and the database so that it will release all the resources which is being held. So this is how we insert data into the MySQL database. So likewise, we can change these statements according to our wish. We can make use of the update statement to update any values of that table. If you want to delete any data from the table, we can pass the delete query to any of these methods. So any of these 3 options can be used to execute all the queries in all the different queries. So to prepare these videos, I had made use of Samantha sir's website, who is a professor from IIT Kharagpur, and the Oracle tutorial website. These were the 2 main references which I have used to prepare my slides for today's video. And that is all for today. Thank you for watching my video. We will continue in the next session.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.